NASCAR is back. We are back. Had a little bit of a hiatus last year. Really kind of bummed us out, but man, we're back at it. This season's going to be so great. I'm so excited. Last year just was absolutely probably one of the best seasons overall for NASCAR. But like I said, it was kind of a bummer to not get to finish the full season like we wanted to. But I think the work that we've done with this new setup, this new studio, I really think that it's going to allow for us to have an even better show, better engagement with our audience. Joe, you want to kind of fill them in? First of all, how the heck are you? But fill them in on kind of some of the changes that we made.
Yeah, there's a lot that's changed. I moved. That's the reason we had to take a break, and we're back at it full bore. We've got more data based on the next-gen results from last year. We have a lot better equipment. We're more comfortable, honestly. This is what we wanted to do from the beginning. Hopefully, the content is meant for you. So hopefully we produce what you're looking for. Always feel free to let us know in the comments. Always want to hear your feedback.
And I want to give a huge shout out to any one of you guys who may be watching this for the first time under this new brand. If you watched our last show, the DK Garage, big thank you to all you guys. Like I said, we really did feel bad not being able to complete the full season, but we were pushing the equipment that we had to the limit. Like you said, you moved, and I moved later, so a lot happened, outside of the show. Life happened.
And it comes at you full speed. I'm glad we were able to adjust, upgrade while we were adjusting, and be able to hopefully produce better stuff for everybody that's watching. And thank you for those that are watching for the first time. We've got a lot to talk about because we are diving into all the things that happened last year, all the changes really that have evolved to make 2023 a season that we're all excited about. And then we'll be looking at the discussion to talk about our playoff projections and looking at last year's results because we put everything together. We had some near misses on the final 16, but I think we were pretty close. We'll see how this season unfolds. We're going to be excited to unwrap this.
Last season was really kind of hard to predict. It's NASCAR, so it's always hard to predict, but the way it shaped out, there was definitely some surprises throughout the season. I kind of think this season might even be harder than last year since all the teams have more information on the car. They made a few changes in the offseason. I think it's going to be a fun but yet challenging season. So it'll be fun to see how our playoff picks this year are as good as last year because I think they were pretty good. But what was before we get into kind of some of the changes, because there's a lot that we got to kind of get to that's important, not just for NASCAR, but let me back up. We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Let's kind of explain to them why the rebrand, why what the show's going to be a little bit about, how it's going to differ from our last show. You want to kind of fill them in on that a little bit, Joe?
Yeah, so the rebrand came because we want to focus on more than just DraftKings. We want to bring our knowledge of the NASCAR realm along with the other motorsports with F1. SRX is being more talked about. We've got some Cup drivers that are now over there full time, even with Brad Keselowski joining the bunch. So there's a lot of entertainment that is throughout the week that I think we can have conversations about. We're going to have our own website that allows you to get the full video version of this podcast straight from there. You do have to be a member, but we're allowing some free trials to take place for the first couple weeks to see how everything does. We really want to bring the content that's relative to you, so that will be there. On the website, also, our podcast is hosted there. You can also find this podcast, the full version of the podcast, on any platform where you get your audio podcast. So we're really excited about that. We also are going to be posting clips through YouTube throughout the week, being able to bring you some relative insights. And then the biggest thing I'm excited about, Jeremy, is we're going to be able to go live. So we'll be doing some live streaming, especially excited for the first race of the year, Daytona, and we'll be able to provide that to you on YouTube Live. We'll be taking your comments and questions on the race. We'll give our thoughts and opinions as well as our impact ratings. We're bringing those back, so we'll be able to give you some DK impact ratings to help you align your contest selections along with your lineups, all of the fun things that we had last year, and then even more.
Yeah, and I think to kind of summarize what Joe is saying, we love DraftKings, but we love racing more. And that's what this show is really going to be about. We're going to be focusing in, just talking about more about the racing, the interactions between the drivers, teams. Probably not going to be the breaking news channel, that type of stuff, but we are going to be reacting to a lot of stuff that happens, outside of the track too, because there's a lot of important things that happen. But because we do still love DraftKings, we'll be including that content on our website as well. And like I said, for the live shows, we'll be covering that a little bit more. The podcast, this is going to be a little bit different. This is more, that preseason kind of episode. So this is going to be a little bit different than our normal episodes. But once we get to the normal ones, not a ton of DraftKings talk other than maybe some seeing how we did from the previous race. But yeah, when we go live and our website, that's going to be where you're going to want to go for all the DraftKings and potential betting type stuff for that. That's where that's going to be. But this show is going to be just focusing on just how great just all this auto racing is. SRX, F1, NASCAR, of course. So really excited to get into it. There was some very big news. Big change at the end of the year. I don't think any of us would have thought that this would have been the case at this point last year, but by the end of the season, we could see the writing on the wall. Kyle Busch is no longer at Joe Gibbs Racing. He actually replaces Tyler Reddick in the 8. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, him joining RCR certainly is going to be interesting. If we ever thought Kyle Busch had a filter, I think we'll see him unfiltered. He'll be a little bit more apt to make amends for accidents. He'll be Kyle Busch. He'll be KFB. I'm excited to see that. It's going to be funny going from the M&M's car to the 3G car. It's going to be harder for my little one to get into school with some of that attire on, but I will be supporting him because he decided to make that switch over to follow Kyle Busch to the 8 ride instead of sticking back for the Joe Gibbs uncharted or unseated 18 ride now.
Yeah. Big. Like I said, you would have. I really didn't think if he was going to go to another team that it would be RCR, because there was a lot of other teams out there who would have obviously tried to make a spot for a talent like Kyle Busch. But that's where he's at. He's in the 8. He's in the old Dale Earnhardt Jr. number. So that's going to be interesting to see how fans really play to that, if they kind of embrace it. I don't think he's going to win over a bunch of fans by doing that. If anything, he probably just created more enemies. But we got a little sneak preview, I think, at the Coliseum. Both Kyle Busch and his teammate Austin Dillon, RCR as a whole, looked really strong.
I really think this makes Austin Dillon better. I think it allows him to have a driver that is more experienced, that has the background that Kyle does, to be able to guide him a little bit more, tell him where he's gone wrong. Kyle, we just talked about, doesn't have a filter, so I'm sure he'll advise him unfiltered and say, hey, bud, you need to clean it up here and here. And we already saw the instant results at the Coliseum. Does that carry over long term? Does it?
You say that though, but he also ran really good at the Coliseum last year.
It's true.
He got absolutely Tyler Reddick just smoked him all year. Yeah, he made it to the playoffs because he got a win at a super speedway, which he's done before, and it's a super speedway. Okay, great, that's a hard thing to do, but it's not like you just went out there and just completely dominated. Reddick last year had his breakout year, and in my opinion, if Richard Childress wasn't his grandpa, he wouldn't be in that ride still. So if what you're saying is right about Kyle Busch kind of being a mentor and helping him out, he needs it, because you had a young guy just absolutely in the same equipment just have his breakout year, so much so that he earned a new ride. We'll see if it's an upgrade or not, replacing Kyle Busch's brother, Kurt Busch, in that 45 2311 car. Any last thoughts on the RCR move, the changes they had before we kind of get into the Reddick news?
I think we summarized that pretty good because the Reddick news was so impactful for both these teams. It's something that now with him at 2311 Racing, it's going to add that extra dynamic. He's going to really be able to hopefully have solid equipment that is capable of winning. We saw Kurt Busch do really well at times in that setup. So I think he'll be able to bring that level of talent, bring that level of expertise that they're looking for to really take this team to the next level, because Bubba Wallace has progressed, and I think with Tyler Reddick as his teammate, Tyler Reddick has a lot of a more aggressive style, kind of Bubba style to a certain extent. So we'll see if that will ultimately end up benefiting this team. I think it does. If they can get their pit crew to give them some solid stops, I think it's going to be a win.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Bubba. I'm sure we're going to be talking about him later in the episode, but especially throughout the season, because you're right. He had some strong runnings throughout the year. Couldn't quite do enough to get into the playoffs, but then he also made some, what I would say, kind of typical, at least once or twice a year, Bubba Wallace moves where he completely just loses it on the track. Intentionally wrecks Larson. Could have been a really bad accident there. We'll see if he has any more little in-the-car meltdowns this year now that he's gone through that. Will be interesting to see, and it'll be interesting to see if Reddick kind of becomes the face. Not that he can overshadow, Michael Jordan or Denny Hamlin, but as far as the drivers go, when you hear 2311, are you going to think Bubba Wallace, or are you going to immediately think Tyler Reddick? Right now, I think, people are going to associate Bubba Wallace more. He's been there longer, obviously, but Reddick with those 3 wins last year and just overall really strong running, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So I got a question for you, though, and then it'll be fun to kind of go back and see how accurate we are now at the end of the year. Who do you think performs better in the 8? So we know Reddick had 3 wins last year. Look at some of his other stats and kind of see, but who do you think? Do you think 2022 Reddick performs better than 2023 Kyle Busch, or do you think it's the other way around?
That's a good question. I would think, can we do an over-under? Or are we going to go straight for it?
No, you just got to pick who has the better year, Kyle Busch in 2023 or Reddick in 2022.
I'm going to go.
And what I mean, maybe he has 2 wins, so he doesn't have as many wins, but maybe he has, more top 5s, just runs a little stronger, more laps led.
I'm going to go with Reddick from last year, and then it's because Kyle Busch has a lot going on in his personal life, a lot going on in the racing world too, to adjust to, going from one manufacturer to another. His whole entire truck series team is doing the same thing. He had a personal issue at the beginning of the year. There's a lot going on in Kyle Busch's life, so I think for this year, I think it's a safe bet. I'm going to go with last year's results from Tyler Reddick. How about you?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's not to say that Kyle Busch can't outperform Reddick, but I don't think that he will outperform Reddick's numbers from last year. Now, will Kyle Busch on track this year perform better than Reddick? I think that might be a little closer. But I think the season that Reddick had last year in that 8, I think we're going to see Reddick, his numbers be a little bit better than Kyle Busch's numbers at the end of the year. But so that kind of brings up, in my opinion, like another big change in the offseason, not just for this driver, but for the sport in general, and that's Kyle Busch's brother, Kurt. He was in the 45. I think when Denny signed Reddick, I don't even think that they knew that Reddick was going to replace Kurt Busch at that time. But Kurt backed in the wall, I believe it was in qualifying at Pocono, and missed the remainder of the year and last we heard, even if he wanted to race this year, he's still not cleared to race because of a concussion. Not used to seeing that in this sport. Obviously, we know Dale Jr., he had some, his concussions issues ended up ending his career probably a little bit early. But for the most part, it's not like the NFL where you hear people talk about concussions on a almost weekly basis. That's not really a thing in NASCAR, but it sure was this past year with Kurt.
And this next-gen car, it seemed like they had some issues with that because we saw Alex Bowman miss later in the year as well. But yeah, Kurt Busch being gone from the sport as an every Sunday driver is going to be difficult because he was fun to watch. He brought an extra level to every team that he ever went to. So I think him still being around the 2311 Racing organization is really going to be impactful for Bubba. It's really going to be impactful for Tyler Reddick and his development and continued growth. I really think that it's a win for Denny and his team. So he's going to be missed, but I think he'll still have a great impact on the sport for years to come. I think it's going to be something that we'll look back and really in future years be like, man, that guy really had it together, and he hopefully gets the recognition he deserves.
Well, I think it's interesting because over the last few seasons, at least in my opinion, Kurt has been rebuilding his image in the sport because for a long time he was just as hated, if not more hated, than Kyle. And he definitely had some questionable moves and decisions throughout his career in the sport. But the last few years, the last year with Chip Ganassi, how he ran and what he was able to do, for that organization. And then obviously 2311, you're like, okay, the older, wiser, more mature Kurt Busch, this is a great guy. That other guy from way back then, he had a couple screws loose or something because he definitely made some questionable calls. But man, it's, in my opinion, is a little a shame that he had to end it maybe a year or two early because he was really starting to click with Ganassi at the end and 2311. I don't know if he makes a deep championship run, but I think he could have had some deep playoff runs. He was in the playoffs this year because of a win and was not able to capitalize on that, but that in a roundabout way helped Bubba Wallace because once the playoffs started, and I think this is a great move on 2311's part, they swapped Bubba and put him in the 45 because that car was playoff eligible. So while he wasn't eligible for a driver's championship, the owner's championship was still up for grabs, and he ended up getting a win at Kansas in the playoffs, which helped propel him to the next round. So he had a deep playoff run, potentially could have been better, but in the playoffs, kind of like I mentioned earlier, he had that issue with Larson at Las Vegas and got suspended for a race, and it's hard to make that up. But that experience, I think, will help Bubba. But unfortunately, it came at the cost of Kurt Busch and his injury. And, of course, you never like to see that.
Yeah, and then still talking about that, the driver that filled in during that time for Kurt was Ty Gibbs. And now Ty Gibbs is full-time at Joe Gibbs, driving his now 54 car. It's his in the Cup Series. So he's somebody that has a lot of talent. We saw him win the championship last year in the Xfinity Series. He's somebody I've been high on for quite a few years, but he has some issues.
He's super young.
Yeah, he has some issues with being able to keep it clean and being able to have the respect of other drivers around him. And is that going to linger into the Cup Series? I really think it does. So this year might not be ideal for Ty Gibbs, but he's got a lot to really build on. He's got a strong resume. He's got a lot of talent. We know that. There's no issues with people don't think he's just driving grandpa's car. I think we know he has talent. Does he have the respect yet? No, not necessarily, but you mentioned it. He's young. I think he's going to hopefully learn, hopefully progress, because I really want to see him succeed, especially over the after the championships, watching the scene after him celebrating in victory lane and then finding out that his father passed away. That's tough, but it might allow him to grow up. It might allow him to have some success that he can utilize some of the previous experiences, some of the impact that his father might have had on him. It might be more relevant today than it was just a couple months ago.
Yeah, there's going to be a real interesting, I think, development to see how he handles things, because he's been obviously coached well by that organization, and he always, when he's in the media, he's always saying the right thing, and to the point where it actually pisses a lot of people off, because they're like, okay, yeah, we get it, blah blah blah, you're saying all the right stuff, but yet you're still not doing the right things. And some of those things were like what happened the race before the championship. He's locked in. He doesn't need to win. His teammate, a Joe Gibbs Racing car, is in the lead.
Brandon
Jones. Granted, at that point, Jones had already said that he was going to be switching teams, going to Junior Motorsports, but he's still racing for your grandpa's team, still with a chance to make the championship, and they raced hard for several laps, and to the point where Gibbs got frustrated enough and he just flat out dumped him. Those are the kind of things that all the other drivers see. They all take notes of it, and it'll be interesting how, I think there was no expectation for Gibbs in the races that he replaced Kurt Busch. It was basically just go out there and practice. You're getting free practice. If you get a great finish, awesome. If not, no big deal. But now he's in a ride where he is eligible for the championship. He's got sponsors that they want to perform well. And how are the fellow competitors going to react to those types of things? Very different, very different driving styles between Xfinity and Cup. And those Cup guys, they're not going to be worked over like some of those Xfinity guys that he could just kind of bully around and just basically lap them because he had better equipment. That's a lot more even. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does this year. But I'm also really interested to see how the other rookie, potential Rookie of the Year candidate, does in Noah Gragson, because he was right behind Gibbs for the championship, had another really good year in Xfinity. I forget how many wins he had. We had quite a few wins last year. I think he had like 4 wins in a row at one point. Just absolutely incredible. But he also got some opportunities to race in Cup for several teams. Colleague was one of them.
He raced for Beard, didn't he?
Yeah, the 62. He raced a couple races, and then it wasn't really supposed to be planned, but he ended up racing several races in the 48 because Bowman, like Kurt Busch, also had some concussion issues. He was able to come back for the final race, did not miss as much because his incident happened later in the year. But Gragson got a lot of extra Cup work this year, as well as Ty Gibbs, and those are the two guys battling for Rookie of the Year, and here they were 1-2 last year. I believe it was 1-2 last year in the Xfinity Championship. So it's going to be really interesting to see, because he's on a new team, or at least newly rebranded team, Legacy Motor Club, which is Petty GMS from last year, plus one of, I'm not going to say the greatest, but I will say one of the greatest drivers, Jimmy Johnson. He's coming on board. He'll be racing a few races this year. That's going to be really, really exciting. But what are you expecting out of Noah Gragson this year?
I'm expecting him to bring an extra element to that 42 ride. We saw Ty Dillon show up a couple times early in the season, but they never really had that performance. But I think Noah brings an extra level of really attitude to it. He really I love Noah Gragson. I love the way he presents himself. He's always will let you know what he's thinking. He's always fun to watch post-race. Post-victory circle is always interesting to see how he'll react on the front stretch.
Yeah, is he going to be throwing up on himself?
It's always fun. So I really like that he's brought that than Jimmy getting involved and being an owner now. Being Legacy Motor Club is first time we haven't seen the Petty name in NASCAR as an owner in quite some time. He is Richard Petty, the King, is the spokesperson now for them. So I think we'll see Noah progress. I don't know if he's going to thrive immediately. I don't know how to really understand yet what the funding looks like. If they're going to be more well funded with Jimmy joining the mix, I would hope so. I think that's one of those things where we can look at and use Eric Jones and his previous performance as a nice metric to watch and see if Noah's really bringing some additional talent to make that program better. And I think he will. I don't know if it's immediate, but that's something we'll have to watch.
Yeah, I don't think we'll get into it too much in this episode, but I think we'll dive down this rabbit hole for our live show for Daytona. Eric Jones actually had a really, really good year, especially from the DraftKings perspective. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but as far as like super, super high value, he had the most, like, I think it was like 10x your value as far as, and we'll get into all that. Doesn't really matter. The point is if you just watch the race and just kind of half pay attention, you would not realize that Eric Jones actually had a really good year. He gets a win earlier. He might make a deep playoff run because he won Darlington, just absolutely killed it at Darlington. Nice to see the 43 back in there in victory lane for a long hiatus. So if he's able to kind of replicate what Eric Jones did last year, I think Noah Gregson's going to be a strong car this year, and he'll have his moments where he could potentially get a nice top 5, possibly a win. But I don't expect him to do that every single race, not yet. That might come next year, a couple years down the line, especially if they, like you said, you talk about getting the funding for Legacy Motor Club, getting that right. Then that's when I think we'll start to see the Noah Gragson that in Xfinity that, we'll start to see him in Cup. But I don't expect that this year. So, well, go ahead.
Yeah, so with that, we've got these two rookies being involved. Who's your pick for Rookie of the Year between Ty Gibbs and Noah Gragson? Are you leaning one way or another right now? Because you put me on the spot. I want to put you on one.
I mean, Ty Gibbs should win Rookie of the Year. He's going to be in better equipment. He's when we say better equipment, that's all the same. But as far as the funding for the team, being able to get that extra little bit, I'm sure there's going to be a couple races where he'll have a little extra tape that he's not supposed to have on there. We'll see if NASCAR busts him like they did Denny and Kyle Busch at Pocono last year. So Ty Gibbs should win Rookie of the Year and probably will. And I'm assuming that's who you're going to pick. So just to be different, I'll go Noah Gragson.
Okay, yeah, I'm going Ty Gibbs for everything you just said. I think he's
jot it down.
He's going to be the Rookie of the Year just because of the equipment situation, and it's not talent level. I think those guys are pretty equal. They bring a lot to the table. I think that's the way it shapes up. But we'll just have to wait and see. That's something we can come take a look at later on and revisit. You mentioned Legacy Motor Club, Jimmy Johnson being involved. He did mention he's going to be running some races, so that's going to be really, really exciting to have him back in it. He's driving the 84 car for them. It's the invert of the 48, but also has a little bit more meaning. You want to share a little bit?
Yeah, I'm sure there's actually quite a bit more than just this, but Jimmy Johnson's on 83 career wins, and he was chasing 84 the last couple years of his full-time career before switching to IndyCar for a few seasons. And if I remember correctly, the getting to 84 wins would tie him with Darrell Waltrip on the all-times win list. He's going for that. That's what these extra few races a year are about, is to take Jimmy Johnson from 83 to 84 wins. It's also the inverse of 48, which is his number for his entire career up until this year. I'm excited. It was rough watching the last few seasons with Jimmy and the last Gen car, I guess the Gen 6. I don't know what Hendrick was doing, but Hendrick as a whole was kind of struggling during that time period. Started finally getting a little bit better in 2020. Obviously, that's the year Chase Elliott won the championship. He won the championship on Jimmy Johnson's last race. A little bit of a passing of the torch there. But it was a little bit of a shame that he wasn't stronger, wasn't putting up those wins we were used to seeing those last few years. Goes to IndyCar. Honestly, he does not do very good. And I think a lot of people, myself included, were hoping that he would do just as good as he did in IndyCar as he did in NASCAR. But you're talking about two completely different disciplines, two different types of cars. You're expecting someone who has mastered stock car racing to go in and compete with the best of the best at open wheel cars. It didn't go as well for Jimmy as we'd liked. He did have some great runs on the oval, which kind of helped even the playing field a little bit. Ran really well there. That was exciting, man. I thought he was going to win a couple. So, but thanks to him, kind of got me a little bit more into IndyCar again. Kind of used to watch it, kind of stop, but that was fun watching him. So just the fact that he's back in NASCAR and going to be running this next-gen car, I'm excited to see what he can do. I don't know if he's going to win any races. I was thinking about this earlier, and we didn't talk about any of this beforehand. Let's just say if Johnson wins the Daytona 500, does the newly formed Legacy Motor Club somehow make it to where they support him for the full season just so he's championship eligible? I don't expect that to happen, but do you think if he's able to pull that rabbit out of the hat, do you think they say, screw it, we're all in, we're putting you in this ride all year, you're getting your 8th championship?
First, that would be awesome. Secondly, I don't think that's going to happen, but we've seen
because he's got to qualify for the Daytona first.
He still has to, and there's 7 or 8 other cars now that are going to be in the mix for that open car spot. I think it's going to be challenging to make the race, let alone if he does win, be able to find funding for the full season for 3 cars or kick a ride out that they've already got signed. I don't think that's going to happen. It would be a hell of a story, though.
Yeah. Put him in or swap the charters for Noah Gragson or something. I don't know how they would do that, but that would be really amazing if that happened. But again, not expecting that at all. But another guy who's making his return to the Cup Series full time in this instance, he's done some races the last few years. Actually, won a race 2 years ago. AJ Allmendinger, the road course ringer, as a lot of people like to call him. He's back. He's in the Colleague car. He's in that 16 car full time. What are you expecting from Allmendinger this year? Because I just got to say on the front end, I think there's going to be some races that he struggles, but I think that if you're going to compare his numbers to when he was with JDG, oh my God,
JTG,
Doherty, in that 47, it's going to be night and day difference. First of all, he's older, wiser, more mature because he's been racing with a bunch of kids for the last few years, and I think it's just his whole mindset is it comes across as different to me. He's a fiery dude. He's going to be fiery this year, but when you have, I think we're still at 6 road courses on the season, I find it very hard to believe that he does not win one of those races and get himself into the playoffs. And when you get in the playoffs, you never know what can happen and how you might progress through. What are your thoughts on Allmendinger coming back?
Well, I think it's going to be fun to watch. I'm one of those people that puts my personal biases back whenever I'm talking about a driver like Allmendinger, because personally, I'm not the biggest fan of some of the way that he handles things and how he's reacted in the past, but professionally and watching him, he's a shoo-in for the playoffs. Like you said, there's 6 road courses. He's going to get a win at one of those. If he's not, he's going to be relevant in that conversation each and every race for those 6 races. That alone, with his performance that we've watched last year at some of the other race courses or racetracks, there's to me, I don't think he misses the playoffs. So
and even at super speedways, which in my opinion is not really his strong suit, but we've seen him in years past work really, really well with Justin Haley, just colleague in general. I don't know if it happens at Daytona, Talladega, but what about a track like Atlanta? I know we're kind of talking a little playoffs here, but I really like the fact that he's coming back this year.
Yeah, it's fun to see him back full time, and that will give us something to dive in and watch throughout the entire season to kind of really see how his performance is measuring up to our expectations. And I think, based on what I already said it, he's going to be a playoff driver, and I think we'll see those numbers trend that way.
Another driver from JTG Doherty.
There you go.
Yeah. Ryan Preece is back. You know, he was out of the Cup Series for at least was it 2 years, 1 year? He wasn't in it last year, I know for sure. I can't remember when that team dropped the 37. But he's done a few races, done, you know, a little truck, a little Xfinity, and obviously all the other stuff that he does outside of the NASCAR world. Heck of a driver. He's back. He comes in to Stewart-Haas Racing. He's replacing Cole Custer in that 41 ride. We got a little bit of a sneak peek of Preece at the Clash. Completely surprised me, but it really shouldn't have because those short ovals are kind of his specialty. What are your thoughts on Preece coming back to the Cup Series and replacing Cole Custer in that ride? What are you kind of expecting from him? What are your thoughts on him?
Well, he's handpicked by Tony Stewart, so I got to give him a thumbs up. I think he's got all sorts of the necessary tools in the background to perform well. We've seen him before really do a good job on some of these short track races and perform strongly. I really think he's borderline playoff guy then in the discussion. Cole Custer being replaced, to me, it's surprising because of the role his dad has over there at that organization, and just how much impact he could have on the decision Tony Stewart made. But at the end of the day, I think Ryan Preece is the guy that brings a better level of talent, more opportunities to get a win, and I think we'll see it play out over time. I don't know if we'll see it instantly, but I think he'll be somebody that could potentially bring some value in a lot of different platforms.
Yeah, I was really surprised. I mean, Cole Custer he's going to be back in Xfinity, but he was, before going to Cup, one of the best Xfinity drivers of that little era, right there with Reddick, right there with Bell. They all kind of came in right at the same time, and he gets a win. I don't want to say fluky because he made a pretty gutsy move to make that car stick at Kentucky, I believe it was, his rookie year, to get that win. But since then, I mean, he's had a couple of moments where he'd be up front. Sometimes he'd qualify good, but it just seemed like you could never really trust or rely on Cole Custer to do anything. And which is kind of surprising because he would, win, every third race in the Xfinity Series when he was full time. We'll see if he does that again. I mean, he won last year, but I think based on performance and kind of what we also saw with Ryan Preece, it's going to be tough to see who does better between the two. But I think Stewart-Haas probably made the right call. Getting Cole Custer out of there, getting the team in general a fresh driver that's kind of starting from scratch. Let's see what we can do. Great run at the Clash. So if we're picking between who does better this year, Ryan Preece versus last year Cole Custer in that 41, I think I'm going to go with Preece. I think he's going to outperform him.
Yeah, I think we see better results out of Ryan Preece in the 41 compared to last year's Cole Custer. I think we really hopefully see this play out long-term for Stewart-Haas and their development, because Kevin Harvick is somebody that's going to be in the conversation because he's riding into the sunset, going into the broadcast booth, and that's something that will be missed, is having Kevin Harvick as part of the conversation weekly, but we still have an entire year. Well, what do you think this season looks like for him and his progression into the booth.
It's going to be good that he's going into the booth. He's going to be joining Fox. Fox really needs that. I mean, Mike Joy's all-time great. Clint Boyer is good. I don't mind him. There's times where I'm like, I'll get a little annoyed with him. But I think Kevin Harvick will have a nice balance. Obviously, they were on the same team for a long time, so there's already some chemistry there. And Kevin Harvick just in general is just really good when he does like race coverages, whether it be for the trucks or Xfinity or whatever. I'm excited that he's going there. Also kind of excited that he is leaving the full-time schedule. It'll be nice to see who replaces him in the 4, because they also are going to have Eric Almirola in a few, at least, if not this year, after next year. So Stewart-Haas is about to get a whole new rebrand over the next couple years. If you enjoyed that clip, then you'll love the full episode. Available on all major streaming podcast platforms. If video podcasts are more your thing, we put the full episodes up on our website, losinggripodcast.com.